They say the dead don't speak, but some promises make them echo louder than the living. When a lone woman's van breaks down outside a restricted military base, a tattoo on her arm halts everything in its tracks, forcing high-ranking officers to confront a past they thought was buried. What follows is a quiet, powerful journey across America's forgotten towns, where memories of war, sacrifice, and a vow to a fallen friend refuse to fade. The story will leave you thinking about the weight of loyalty and what it truly means to keep a promise. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. Then hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might just change how you see everything. Catherine Boyle's fingers were already deep in the engine when the hiss of escaping steam kissed her wrist. She didn't flinch. Her knuckles, streaked black with grease and dried with age, kept moving with the slow patience of someone who knew pain had no advantage in moments like this. 30 years ago, her hands had snapped together field radios under sniper fire. A little burn didn't mean a thing. The van, a faded green '98 Ford with one working headlight and a cracked rear window, had been pushing its limits for weeks. The bumper sagged. The ceiling fabric drooped like tired eyelids. But Catherine talked to it like a mule. Gentle words, firm hands, quiet expectation. She hadn't named the van. Didn't feel right giving something a name when the last named thing she'd loved had died in her arms. Her left boot scraped the gravel as she adjusted her stance. One knee popped. The sound, like a finger snap, made her sigh and reach deeper into the mess of hoses and rust. She found the clamp, twisted, felt the bolt loosen, then catch. A flicker of triumph flared behind her ribs, but she didn't let it grow. There was always a catch. The road taught her that long before war did. She felt the shadow before she heard the voice. "You can't be here, ma." It wasn't said cruelly, but it wasn't kind either. Just clipped, the way authority gets when it's used to being obeyed. She slid out from under the hood, wiping her hands on the back of her jeans, the sweat already starting to crust along her brow. The voice came from a young man in uniform, standing too straight for a day this hot. "This is a restricted military access road," he added. "We're going to need you to step away from the vehicle." Catherine looked at him without blinking. His face was smooth, maybe 25, maybe less. His jaw clenched like he'd just watched a video on how to be intimidating. Behind him, another soldier approached. His partner, maybe, or just reinforcement in case the old woman fixing her radiator turned violent. "Disrepairing a cracked hose," she said. "Won't be long." The second soldier walked a little faster now, already bringing a radio to his mouth. "We've got a civilian inside the perimeter," he muttered, probably to command. "Requesting immediate tow." "I don't need a tow," she said. "That's not your call," the first one snapped. "Ma'am, move away from the van." She could have pushed back harder, but Catherine had learned that some things you don't argue about. Instead, she straightened slowly, deliberately, reaching for the rag in her back pocket to wipe her neck. She turned sideways without realizing it, just enough for her right arm to face them. The younger one noticed first. His expression shifted, not much, but enough. His eyebrows twitched. His lips parted slightly as if he'd forgotten what to say next. He tilted his head just a few degrees, trying to get a clearer look. Catherine felt the heat of their gaze before she saw the reason. The tattoo. It wasn't elaborate, not flashy. Just a black skull inside a shield, faded at the edges where sun and age had worn it down. But it was a mark, a code, and those who knew, knew. The second soldier stopped mid-step. The radio dropped to his side. Then, tires on gravel. An SUV rolled to a stop just past the curve. Black. Government tissue. Dust still swirling in its wake. The doors opened, slow and sure, like something from a courtroom drama. A man in his late 60s stepped out, chest full of ribbons, stars so sharp they could cut steel. 4-star general. He didn't look at the soldiers. He looked at Catherine. And then his spine snapped straight. His heels came together. His right hand rose with precision that came from decades of habit, and he saluted. The heat from the van seemed to vanish. Even the breeze paused to listen. The two soldiers shifted, awkward, their earlier certainty crumbling in real time. Catherine didn't salute back. She just nodded once, a small gesture. Like two ghosts recognizing each other across a river, the general lowered his hand, walked forward, slow but certain. His face, carved from years and protocol, broke just slightly around the mouth. "Echo Division," he said, voice like gravel. "Third Coastal." Catherine inclined her head. "You remember the patch?" "Don't just remember it," he said. "I lost a friend under that banner." There was a beat of silence, not heavy, more like reverence. The soldiers stood aside now, unsure whether to speak or vanish. "Didn't mean to cause trouble," she said. Van coughed out. "Didn't realize I drifted this close." The general gave a low laugh, like someone blowing dust off a photograph. "Trouble? Miss Boyle, you're standing on the bones of history. These boys just didn't realize it." One of the young men blinked. "Miss Boyle?" he asked, more to himself than anyone else. The general turned. "You two know who you just threatened?" Neither answered. He didn't wait for them to try. "He's the reason half of our field evac protocols exist." Catherine Boyle ran covert trauma ops during the worst of the insurgent ambushes in '96. Survived 5 forward operating bases being overrun. Dragged out 26 soldiers alive. 18 more came home in bags she zipped herself. If not for her and a woman named Carla Jennings... His voice caught. The youngest soldier looked pale. "Get her water," the general barked, softer now. Catherine held up a hand. "Don't need any medals. Don't need any speeches. Just need this hose replaced so I can keep my promise." The general studied her. "Still keeping that vow?" She nodded. "Every town. Every mile." He stepped back. "Carry on, then." No one else said a word. She bent down again, hands back in the engine's mouth, the heat of the moment already cooling into memory. The soldiers stepped away, now guards of a different kind, and the general, he lingered just long enough to watch her work, then turned back toward the SUV, nodding once at the past. The van would live another day. So would her mission. And as Catherine twisted the final bolt, the ghost of Carla Jennings whispered across her shoulder like the breeze. "Almost there, Cat. Almost." The crunch of bootsteps faded behind her as the soldiers moved off. Their voices hushed now, uncertain, like boys sent outside after breaking a vase in their grandmother's living room. Catherine stayed where she was, squatting by the radiator, her fingers grazing the hose clamp that had given her trouble in the first place. The heat was still rising off the engine block, but she didn't mind it. She preferred the sting of work to the chill of remembering. She pulled the clamp tight, checking it once more before letting her hands fall to her knees. Her knuckles ached. She stretched them slowly, watching the shadows of her fingers dance across the hood under the low slanting sun. They used to be steadier, back when they were needed to hold scalpels in war zones, to dress shrapnel wounds with a strip of gauze and half-whispered prayers. Behind her, the faint hum of a bass in motion filtered through the tree line. Camp Archer wasn't far, less than a mile if she had to guess. She could hear the cadence again, that steady thud of synchronized boots slapping pavement. A drill run, probably evening formation. Even after all these years, her bones still aligned with the rhythm, muscle memory stubborn as old grief. She stood, slowly. The crack in her knee reminded her of the jump from the medevac chopper in '95, when the landing zone was a rice paddy instead of a clearing, and she twisted sideways under Carla's weight, shielding her from the fall. Carla had cursed all the way down and then laughed in the mud, calling her dramatic. "You ain't got to cradle me like I'm some princess, Boyle," she'd said. "I can take a hit." Catherine dusted her hands off against her jeans and turned toward the chain-link fence. It was a sad thing, leaning slightly inward, like even it didn't have the strength to hold itself up anymore. Barbed wire lined the top, rusted and drooping in spots, as though the years had taken their toll there, too. A voice called from behind, "Ma'am." She looked back. The general was still there, alone now, one hand resting casually on the door of his SUV. "I'd like to offer you a place to rest," he said. "Inside the perimeter, just a cup of coffee, nothing official." Catherine tilted her head. "Didn't think I needed clearance for caffeine." He cracked a smile. "You don't. Consider it old-timers sharing a table." She hesitated, weighing the invite. She wasn't one for reunions, or small talk, or the kind of stories people like to fish for when they know you've seen something they can't imagine. But the road had been long, and her water bottle was dry, and something in his voice wasn't seeking a favor, just company. Maybe that was rare enough to accept. She nodded once. The ride to the gate was short, silent. The gravel road turned to pavement, the tree line giving way to concrete structures and flat open yards. Watchtowers loomed like skeletal giants above the perimeter wall. The gate guards snapped to attention at the general's approach, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored shades. The van was left behind, its hood still slightly raised like a yawn paused mid-motion. They parked near an administrative building, with peeling paint and an overworked air conditioner unit buzzing just above the doorway. Inside, the general led her to a small break room. 2 metal chairs, a dented table, a coffee maker that looked like it belonged in a museum. He poured her a cup without asking how she took it. She didn't correct him. The bitterness of black coffee always felt like home. He sat across from her, hands folded, elbows off the table. "You ever come through Archer before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Closest I came was 3 towns east. But Carla, she had family here. Used to write letters back to a niece who drew her these wild pictures. Purple tigers and flying tanks." The general nodded slowly. "Jennings. That was her last name?" Catherine nodded. "I read the file," he said. "After you left. Had to piece things together. It was never official, the op you were on. Black bag buried so deep half the brass didn't even know you existed. But those of us who served long enough, we hear whispers. I remember a story from years ago. 2 medics refused extraction during a collapse, stayed back to clear the wounded. Most of the team made it out because of them. Sounded like legend." Catherine didn't answer right away. She stared into her cup like the memories might be swirling somewhere inside it. "She made me promise," she said finally. "Said if she didn't make it, I had to go see what we were fighting for. One town at a time, every state, every face, every place that peace had a chance to grow. She said, we gave enough blood to earn the right to see it bloom." The general didn't interrupt. Catherine blinked once, hard. "I didn't get to keep her dog tags. They never found her pack." He reached into his breast pocket and slid a small envelope across the table. Catherine frowned. She opened it with a care that felt ceremonial. Inside was a single photograph. Black and white. Faded edges. 2 women in fatigues. Arms slung around each other. Dust on their cheeks. Rifles over their shoulders. One grinning wide. The other, Catherine? Just barely smiling. Like she was holding the moment together with sheer will. "I had a contact dig through archives," he said quietly. "That was taken a week before the assault in Bell Creek. My people had it stored under classified recon logs, never meant to surface." She traced her thumb along the image, over Carla's smile. "I remember this," she murmured. "Right before we snuck MRE crackers into the captain's bunk. He thought he had termites." They both laughed, soft and reverent. The room settled into quiet again, not awkward but reflective. "You know," the general said after a while, "those boys at the fence, when they saw the tattoo, they stopped breathing. I watched it happen. You reminded them that some heroes don't look like statues or medals. They look like grease-streaked women under broken-down vans." Catherine smirked. "They'll recover." "They should do more than that," he said. "You still going west?" She nodded. "Have to. Still got 4 more states to hit. I promised her I'd finish before the end of the year." "Where to next?" "Alabama, then Mississippi, Arkansas. Final stop's her hometown in Texas. Kansas, Ohio. 3 of them. Bobbas." He looked like he wanted to say something more. Instead, he reached for the coffee pot and refilled both cups. "You're welcome to stay the night," he offered. "We've got a spare room in the officer quarters. Doesn't smell too much like regret." She chuckled. "Appreciate it. But I've got enough ghosts of my own. I'll rest in the van." They sat a while longer, sipping quietly, the sun dipping behind the horizon just outside the window. Night came slow, pressing in like a closing hand, but Catherine didn't feel it heavy. Not this time. There was something about the fence, the coffee, the photo in her palm. The road would still be there tomorrow. But for tonight, it felt okay to stop. She didn't sleep much that night. Catherine lay stretched across the back bench of the van, a rolled-up flannel jacket as her pillow, the heavy warmth of summer thick in the air. Crickets sang somewhere beyond the base perimeter, and every so often a low rumble of aircraft passed overhead, the kind that always made her fingers twitch toward a weapon that wasn't there. Sleep came in small, shallow pockets, like water left in a dented canteen, useless if you were really thirsty. Her eyes finally opened for good sometime before dawn, not from noise, but instinct, the kind of waking that comes with having survived too many years in places where even rest was tactical. She sat up, her joints complaining, and stared out the windshield at the fence line. The sky was still dark, but a pale gray band had begun to spread low over the horizon like spilled milk. She stepped out of the van barefoot, the gravel cool and damp under her feet. With a kind of methodical calm she never lost, she rinsed her face with bottled water, wiped her arms with a spare rag, and redid the braid in her hair. Her hands worked without needing thought, old muscle memory guiding every knot, every tuck. When it was done, she looked like what she was, a woman with somewhere to be. By 600, she had the hood down and the van purring again. It was an ugly purr, more like a raspy smoker's cough, but it was steady. That's all she asked for anymore. Nothing smooth, just steady. She was about to climb in when she heard boots again. Lighter this time, quicker. One of the younger soldiers from the day before was approaching, barely old enough to grow a decent mustache, but trying to walk like he'd carried the weight of combat already. She admired the effort, at least. He slowed as he neared, looking unsure. "Ma'am, General Ryder said you might still be here." He? He asked me to give you this." The soldier handed over a sealed envelope. "And, sorry. About yesterday." Catherine took the envelope and gave him a once-over. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how to say it. She didn't press him. She just nodded once, the way Carly used to when someone was finally learning how to listen. The soldier lingered a second longer, then stepped back and turned toward the base, shoulders squarer than when he arrived. Catherine slid back into the driver's seat and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. Military issue. "Miss Boyle, if you have time before you hit the road, I'd like to walk you through a room we don't open very often. I think you'll want to see it." She stared at the note for a moment, fingers brushing the edge. Something about the handwriting caught her off guard. It wasn't stiff or forced like most officers she'd met over the years. It was clean, deliberate, almost humble. She folded the paper and tucked it into her coat. The meeting point was easy enough to find. A drab concrete building marked logistics storage, restricted on a rusted sign, guarded by a young corporal who barely glanced up before waving her through. General Ryder met her just inside, dressed casually now, a baseball cap in hand, coffee in the other. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said. "Made out rush." He smiled faintly. "Good. Come on." The hallway was narrow, lit by old fluorescents that flickered in a way that reminded her of field hospitals overseas. He led her down 2 left turns, then through a door with a faded keypad. No lock, just old brass hinges and a noise that echoed too loud in the quiet. Inside, the room smelled like dust and time. Old flags hung along the walls, their colors dimmed to gray. Wooden display cases lined the perimeter, holding dog tags, faded journals, cracked canteens, medals with names scratched into the backs. A thin film of history coated everything like powder. It wasn't a museum. It was a crypt of memory. Private. Sacred. Ryder walked to the far wall and pointed to a frame beneath a yellowed field map. Inside, under glass, was a single photograph. 2 women in a bombed-out alleyway. One crouched over a wounded soldier, hand pressed to his leg, face streaked with blood and grit. The others stood just behind, rifle pointed upward, scanning the rooftop shadows. "That's you," he said. Catherine stepped closer. "That's Carla." Her voice didn't waver, but something in her throat closed a little. "I didn't know this existed," she said. "Neither did I until last year. Some archivist in Quantico flagged it during a digitization sweep. Took me 6 months to trace it back to you. I kept it quiet. Thought maybe one day it would mean something to the right person." She studied the photograph like it might change shape if she blinked. Carla looked exactly as she remembered. Alert, wild-eyed, always watching the edges. Catherine had forgotten that about her. The way she never stood still, never fully trusted quiet. She had a scar, Catherine said, just above her left eyebrow. Called it her hell line. Swore every good soldier carried a map of their worst day on their skin. Ryder pointed gently at her forearm. "Like your tattoo?" And she looked down. The ink had faded some over the years, but the shape remained sharp. A skull nested inside a shield, a curved blade behind it, the insignia of the Ghost Medevac Division. A unit so classified half the military still swore it never existed. "She got hers before me," Catherine said. "When I finally earned mine, she made me sit through the pain without a flinch. Said we'd both bled for it already, might as well wear it like armor." "You're the last one I know of with that mark," Ryder said. "I've searched. Most of the others either died or disappeared." "I didn't disappear," she said. "I just kept moving." He nodded. "I figured as much." They stood in silence for a long moment, the photo between them like a portal back through fire and sand. Finally, Ryder moved toward a small bench in the corner and lifted the lid. Inside was a box, plain olive green. He opened it carefully and removed a cloth-wrapped item, handing it to her without a word. Catherine unwrapped it slowly. Dog tags. Her breath hitched, only slightly, but enough. She turned the metal over. Jennings, Carla M. O.M. Neg. U.S.M. They were recovered 2 years after the operation. Unmarked evidence bag. Somehow made it into storage with a pile of contractor files. "I found them last month. Wasn't sure if you'd want them." Catherine closed her fist around the tags. They were cold. Heavy. "I promised her I'd carry her with me," she said softly. "Now I finally can." Ryder stepped back, gave her the room. She stood there a long time, her silhouette framed by the dull light overhead, Carla's name pressed against her chest. Outside, the sky had turned a soft amber. The road waited. But Catherine wasn't ready to leave just yet. The sun hovered just above the horizon, suspended in that golden hush where day hasn't yet surrendered to night and night hasn't quite taken the lead. Catherine stood by the van again, the dog tag still nestled in her hand like a pulse she could finally touch. They were heavier than she remembered, not in weight, but in gravity, like they carried time itself. She'd tucked the cloth they were wrapped in into her front pocket, too, clean to throw away, too sacred to leave behind. Ryder had said no more after handing them over, just a respectful nod and a quiet retreat, leaving her alone with what the years had kept hidden. Catherine leaned against the bumper, her hip aching from the angle, and closed her eyes. And there she was again, not at Camp Archer, not in Virginia, not even in her van, but in the heat, back in uniform. The camouflage clung to her skin like a second hide, soaked in sweat and powdered dirt. Everything smelled of gun oil, sun-baked nylon, and adrenaline. They were on the western edge of a place so rough it barely had a name. Their maps had it labeled Zone Echo 4, but everyone just called it the Shelf. A narrow, rocky shelf of terrain tucked between two ridgelines, where their evac route had been compromised after 3 failed attempts. The helicopter couldn't land. The smoke was too thick. She remembered crouching behind a jagged rock, her rifle slung across her back, her fingers pressed to a soldier's throat. No pulse. His name had been Baker, or maybe Daniels. They'd lost the dog tags in the blast. She remembered how the edges of her vision blurred when she realized the morphine was gone. 2 wounded men lay 10 meters behind her, one with a severed foot, the other with something shrapnel-sized rattling in his chest. Carla had been yelling into the comms, static hissing so loud it made your teeth ring. "They're not coming," she'd said finally, voice quiet over the short-range headset. Catherine had known it before Carla said it. The sky was too quiet. That awful kind of quiet where you know the gods had stopped watching. "We can't hold this," Catherine had replied. "I know," Carla said, "but they can," and that was it. No drama, no tearful exchange, just a plan, wordless but understood. Catherine would take the wounded, Carla would stay behind. One more push through the ravine, 10 minutes of cover fire, and maybe they'd have a chance. Catherine had looked at her, really looked. Carla's face was streaked with ash, blood smeared across her cheek like war paint. Her lips set in that hard, sarcastic line she wore when she was afraid, but wouldn't admit it. Catherine tried to say something, anything, but all that came out was a hollow breath. Carla had grabbed her shoulder. "If I don't make it," she started. "You will?" Carla squeezed harder. "If I don't, Cat, don't just disappear. Don't bury this. I want you to see the places I didn't get to. I want you to understand why we bled for this. Not the flags, not the speeches, the people, the stupid roadside diners, the rivers, the music, the damn lightning bugs, all of it. Promise me." And Catherine, too numb to argue, had nodded. Because sometimes that's the only way you can survive a goodbye. She blinked now, back in the present, the memory slipping away like sand through her fingers. She took the tags and looped them around her neck. The metal felt cold against her chest, but grounding, like a compass needle finding north. Someone knocked on the side panel of the van. She turned to see Ryder standing there, the to-go cup in one hand, a folder in the other. He offered the coffee first. "You looked like you needed a second cup." She took it. "You always carry around warm beverages for war ghosts?" "Only the decorated ones," he said. They both smiled faintly. He held up the folder. "Mind if I show you something else?" She gestured toward the back of the van. "Let's sit." They settled on the tailgate, the van's open door swinging lazily in the breeze. Ryder opened the folder, revealing 6 printed sheets, mostly maps, coordinates, mission logs, with classified headers now stamped declassified, internal use only. He tapped the corner of one. This was your last op. She looked down. That's the shelf. It was redacted in most versions of the report. Says here the extraction team arrived 23 minutes late due to enemy mortar interference. No visual confirmation on Jennings after evac. Presumed KIA. Catherine traced the lines on the map with her eyes. I always wondered if they found her. I used to dream about her being taken alive. Then the dream stopped. So I figured maybe... I stopped hoping. Ryder shook his head. We looked, I swear we did. But that valley was a furnace. She'd have stayed hidden if she could. You don't get caught when you're covering others. He looked at her, jaw tight. We should have gone back sooner. We always think that, she said. But the war doesn't care what we meant to do. They sat a while in silence, the sun creeping higher, the world starting to stir with a slow churn of morning. Catherine took a long sip of the coffee. It was bitter and too hot, but she drank it anyway. I've been through 32 states so far, she said after a time. Stopped at every town that looked like it had a soul. I take a photo of each one. Small places, not cities. Places Carla would have laughed about. The kind with 3 stoplights and 1 church. I've got them all in a binder. Smile me. Because she asked me to. Because if I keep moving, she stays with me. If I stop, Ryder finished it for her. She's gone. Catherine nodded. I don't do speeches, he said. But you've done something most people never do. You kept a promise. For decades. Through every bad mile and rough motel and busted carburetor. She gave a soft grunt of amusement. I also cursed every inch of it. Still counts. He stood and extended a hand. She took it, rising slowly, her bones reluctant but loyal. He looked at her again, not with pity, but with the strange reverence soldiers reserve for those who've seen things, and still kept walking. If you need anything, he said, Camp Archer's got your 6. She nodded. Thanks, General. Call me Walter. She raised an eyebrow. Doesn't feel right. He smirked. You earned it. She shook his hand one more time, then turned back toward the driver's seat. As she pulled the door closed, she caught her reflection in the rear-view mirror. The same tired eyes, but lighter in them now. She reached up and touched the dog tags at her collarbone. I'll keep going, Carla, she whispered. You just keep riding shotgun. She started the engine. It coughed once, rattled hard, then settled into that ugly, faithful rumble. The road ahead shimmered with heat and possibility, and Catherine Boyle drove forward, one state closer to a promise kept. The van's wipers squeaked once, useless against the dust that had caked across the windshield. Catherine leaned forward, squinting past the grime as the back roads of Alabama unspooled before her like ribbon pulled from a drawer. Every few miles she passed through towns too small to have more than a gas station and a half-remembered name. Places where time didn't seem to move so much as settle. She didn't stop in all of them, just the ones that felt right. The ones Carla would have liked. She took photos from the shoulder of the road. Signs for Sunday barbecues, weathered barns with peeling paint, a mural of a dog wearing aviators. She'd gotten good at framing them fast, no filter, just a quick click and the moment was captured. Another pin in Carla's invisible map. The binder lay on the passenger seat, thick with plastic sleeves. Inside, each photo sat paired with a scrap of paper, the town's name, the date, a single sentence about what she saw. Church with chipped white steeple, smelled like honeysuckle, or high school football field with kids practicing even in the heat. She never wrote much, just enough to anchor the memory. She hadn't meant to stop in Havens Hollow, but the van disagreed. A hard rattle turned into a metallic groan, and by the time she spotted the faded green sign for Havens Hollow, population 1,306, the van was barely limping. She coasted into the first service station she saw, an old family-run place with a sign that read Wren's Auto in flaking red paint. Catherine stepped out, stretched her legs, and tilted her head toward the sky. Overcast now, the kind of gray that presses down on your chest like a held breath. She left the keys on the dash and walked into the shop, the door jingling behind her. A man in his early 70s stood behind the counter, beard white but neatly trimmed, hands covered in black grease. He looked up over his glasses. "Let me guess," he said. "She started coughing like a smoker in church and lost the will to live right outside town?" "More or less. Name's Tom Wren. Been fixing broken things since before you were probably born." Catherine cracked the faintest smile. "Catherine Boyle, and that van's held together by spite and zip ties." "I like her already," he said, and handed her a clipboard. While he brought the van around back, Catherine settled into a cracked plastic chair by the window and watched the street. It was one main road, a line of buildings on either side. Post office, diner, hardware store. A kid on a bicycle rode past, followed by a dog that looked more bark than bite. She could have sworn the place smelled like rain. Tom came back 20 minutes later, wiping his hands. "You've got a busted serpentine belt," he said, "and your coolant's low enough to make me nervous. I can get the parts from Montgomery, but it'll be a few hours." "I've waited longer for worse," Catherine said. "Is there somewhere nearby I can get a coffee and kill some time?" He pointed out the window. "Diner across the street. Best pie in 3 counties. Tell Ida I sent you and she'll charge you extra." Catherine crossed the street and stepped into the diner. It looked like every roadside stop she'd ever known. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and a waitress who knew everyone's name. The kind of place where the coffee pot never cooled, and the same 5 songs played on the jukebox every day. Ida, a woman in her 60s with a beehive hairdo and a voice like warm gravel, took one look at Catherine and said, "You look like you've seen your share of things." "Not all of them good," Catherine replied. Ida poured the coffee without asking and slid over a slice of apple pie. "Sold the house," she said. "You've got that look." "What look's that?" "The kind that says you're driving from something, not toward it." Catherine stirred cream into her cup. "Maybe both." Ida didn't press, just gave a knowing nod and went to refill another customer's mug. She ate the pie slowly, her eyes drifting to the photographs pinned to the wall beside the register. Locals from years gone by, veterans mostly, old black and white shots of boys in uniform, faces too young for the battles they'd seen. She found herself staring at one. A young man in army dress blues, handsome, square jaw. Behind him, another soldier. Out of focus, half-shot, but unmistakable. It was Carla. Younger, smiling like she always did before trouble. Catherine stood, moved closer. The photo was labeled in faded ink. Memorial Day Parade, Havens Hollow, 1993. Ida noticed her interest. "You knew her?" "Yeah," Catherine whispered. "I did. She used to visit her uncle here," Ida said. "Stayed one summer, worked at the firehouse. Broke every boy's heart. She passed, right?" Catherine nodded. "Shame," Ida said. "She had this way of making people feel like they could take on the world. Never forgot her." Ida took a deep breath, her ill-fitting suit peeling away. Ida's face reflected. Catherine swallowed the ache rising in her throat. "Neither did I." Ida brought her another cup without asking. "Take your time." She did. When the van was ready, Tom waved off her payment for labor. "Veterans eat free and drive free around here," he said. Catherine didn't argue. As she drove out of Havens Hollow, she stopped at the edge of town and got out to take a photo of the welcome sign. Below it, a smaller plaque read, "In honor of those who served and stayed in our hearts." She took the picture, added it to the binder. This time, she wrote, "Havens Hollow." Carla's smile is still here, so is she. And then she drove on, the road rising ahead like a question still waiting for its answer. Catherine drove west with the windows cracked, letting the wind slip in and tug at her sleeves like a restless child. The binder on the passenger seat had grown fat, swollen with towns, faces, memories. Each page a weight, each one a piece of the silence she'd carried for decades. She didn't need music. The road made its own soundtrack. The groan of tires over cracked asphalt, the low hum of insects, the hiss of air through the vents. It was enough. Mississippi came and went in a blur of green. She passed cotton fields, rusting tractors, churches the size of sheds. Every so often she'd stop, stretch her legs, snap a photo, write a note. Her hands moved like clockwork, but her thoughts drifted. Something had shifted after Haven's Hollow. That photograph in the diner, it had unsettled her in a way she hadn't expected. She'd seen Carla's face before in dreams, in memories, even in the reflection of her own regret. But seeing her there, caught in the frame of someone else's life, smiling, unbothered, real, made it feel like Carla had never truly left. Like she'd simply stepped into the backdrop of America and waited for Catherine to find her again. In Arkansas, the heat pressed down like a punishment. She stopped in a small town called Red Hook, where the buildings were low and squat, and the air hung heavy with the smell of rain that hadn't come yet. A storm was building somewhere behind the clouds, but no one seemed in a rush. Life moved slower here, like everything had already seen its share of hurrying. She found a bench near a public park, shaded by a massive oak tree with a trunk as wide as a car. The binder rested in her lap. She turned a page slowly, studying each photo. Each one reminded her of a conversation, a joke, a fight. Carla had hated black coffee, but drank it anyway. She could field strip a rifle blindfolded, but always got lost in grocery stores. She'd named every scar on her body, called them chapters. "Here lies chapter 9, she used to say, tapping the one on her side. "That time I tried to outsmart an IED with duct tape and bad intel." Catherine smiled at the memory. Then, let the page fall? She didn't notice the man approach until his shadow cut across her feet. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice soft, polite. "You Catherine Boyle?" She looked up sharply. He was older, maybe mid-50s, clean-shaven, wearing jeans and a military ball cap. His eyes were the kind that didn't flinch, like he'd stared down more than his share of bad news. "Depends who's asking." He smiled faintly. "Name's Ellis. Walter Ryder gave me a call." Catherine set the binder aside. "You two keep in touch?" "We served together a long time ago. Not often, but when we do, it usually means something matters." He sat on the edge of the bench, hands resting on his knees. "Run the local VFW hall here," he said. "We don't see many like you come through. Walter said you might be willing to share something with the younger vets, about Carla, about what it meant to keep going." Catherine looked down at her hands. "I'm not much of a speaker." "You don't have to be," he said. "Just honest, that's enough." She didn't answer right away. A breeze stirred the binder pages, flipping one gently as if Carla herself was trying to say something. "You should be..." Later that night, she found herself standing at the front of a room filled with folding chairs and quiet eyes. The hall smelled like wood polish and coffee, and the flag in the corner hung heavy, like it had heard everything before. Catherine didn't prepare a speech. She just started talking. "I'm not here to give a history lesson," she said. "I'm not here to make anyone cry or to pretend that what happened to us is something anyone else can fully understand." She paused, let the quiet stretch. "I had a friend. Her name was Carla Jennings. We served together. She saved lives, and when the time came, she gave hers so others could leave that valley." A few heads bowed. One man clenched his jaw. "She made me promise to see this country," Catherine continued. "Not from behind a window, not just the cities or the monuments, but the places you forget about, the ones people pass through and never stop to name. Because that's what we fought for, not just the idea of freedom, but the shape it takes. The people, the corners, the tiny pieces that make up something bigger than any one of us." Someone sniffled quietly in the back row. "I've been to 35 states now, and in every single one I've carried her with me." She reached into her coat and pulled the dog tags from beneath her shirt, holding them up. "These are hers. Found after all these years. Brought back to me by someone who remembered what it meant to honor the fallen." Her voice didn't crack, not once, but something in the room did. A silence filled with more than just absence. Respect. Recognition. Echoes. When it was over, people came up one by one. They didn't say much. A few shook her hand. One young Marine hugged her and said thank you with tears still drying on his face. She didn't brush them off. Back at the van, she slid into the front seat, the tags warm now against her skin. She looked in the mirror, saw the lines on her face, the gray threaded through her hair, and thought, "I look like someone who remembers." That night, she parked at the edge of a field just past town. The sky had cleared, and the stars came out, fierce and brilliant. She lay in the back with the doors open, letting the cool air roll in, listening to the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of trucks on the highway. She opened the binder again, flipped to an empty page. And then she did something she hadn't done in a long, long time. She picked up a pen, and she wrote more than just a line. She wrote a full paragraph about the people in the VFW, about the stories they shared, the look in their eyes, the way they stood when they talked about the ones they'd lost. She wrote about the way Carla would have laughed at the grizzled old men trying to hide their feelings, and how she would have danced with every one of them if someone had turned on a radio. When she finished, she stared at the page a while. Then she whispered, "We're almost there, Carla. Just one more stop." And she meant it. The road into Colton, Texas, was flat and wide, lined with scrub brush and the kind of sky that made you feel like you were driving through the center of the world. Catherine gripped the wheel loosely, one hand resting near the dog tags at her chest. They clinked softly each time the van rattled over a crack in the road. She could feel Carla in every bounce, in every gust of warm wind pushing through the cracked window. This was it, the last stop. Colton wasn't much. A courthouse, a diner, a gas station that probably hadn't updated its pump since the early 90s, but it was where Carla had grown up. Catherine remembered the stories. Bike rides down dusty trails, sneaking into the town pool after dark. Her first job at the grocery store that doubled as a hardware shop. Carla had talked about it like it was a dream, a sleepy, slow-breathing place where nothing bad could reach her. Back then, Catherine had rolled her eyes. Now she understood. She parked near the town square, across from a modest brick building with a bronze plaque out front, Colton Veterans Memorial Library. The plaque listed local names, dozens of them, some still living, some not. Catherine didn't approach it yet. She needed a moment. The van gave one last shudder when she turned the key and the engine cut. Silence settled over her like a warm coat. She took the dog tags from around her neck and held them in her hand, the metal warm from the hours on her skin. Her fingers traced Carla's name again, slowly, like she was trying to memorize it one final time. She stepped out, stretching her legs. No one paid her much attention. A man swept the sidewalk in front of the barber shop. A teenage girl rode past on a rusted blue bike, earbuds in, oblivious. Life went on. The town square was simple. An oblong circle of grass surrounded by flagpoles and a row of hedges trimmed into neat corners. In the center stood a memorial made of stone and steel, a wide base, a flag at half-staff, a plaque bolted into the surface, framed by two brass eagles. She walked toward it slowly, like her body understood the weight of the moment before her mind did. She stopped at the edge, looked down. Her breath caught. There, etched into the stone, halfway down the right side. Genus, Carla M. USMC. K.I. The letters were deep, clean, permanent. Catherine knelt down, running her hand over the name. A breeze passed through the square, soft and cool, brushing the sweat from her neck. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The wars, the miles, the pain she'd carried like a second skin. It was just her and the stone and the space between them. "You made it home after all," she whispered. She stayed there for a while, long enough for the man with the broom to pause and nod, long enough for the church bell to ring once in the distance. When she finally stood, she walked back to the van, pulled the binder from the passenger seat, and took out one last photo. It was the picture from Camp Archer, the one of her and Carla, years younger, standing in that ruined alley, faces marked by war, but eyes still fierce. She'd kept it near the front all this time. Now she removed it from its sleeve. At the memorial's base, a small slot had been carved into the stone, just beneath the plaque. A place for flowers, notes, whatever people needed to leave behind. She slid the photo in carefully, pressing it into place. Then she took out a pen and a torn scrap of paper from her back pocket. On it, she wrote just 3 words. "Promise kept, Carla." She tucked the note behind the photo and stepped back. As she turned to leave, a voice called out, "Excuse me, ma'am." Catherine turned. A man in full dress uniform was crossing the square, army green with ribbons along his chest and polished shoes that clicked on the pavement. His face was weathered, close to her age, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his service cap. "You Catherine Boyle?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes." He stopped 2 feet away, then snapped to attention. Eluded. It was not a casual salute, not a reflexive gesture. It was deliberate, held firm, his eyes locked with hers. She blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "We were told," he said quietly, "that if you ever came here, we were to honor you, not because of rank, not even because of your record, but because of the promise you kept. Carla Jennings' family still lives here. Her niece runs the community center. They told us what you were doing. We never forgot." Catherine's mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't expect this." "Maybe not," he said, "but you earned it." He lowered his salute, extended a hand. "My name's Colonel Royce. I served under a man named Ryder. He told me you'd come through, said you'd finish what so many of us couldn't." Catherine shook his hand, firm, quiet, the kind of grip that said we understand each other without needing to say it. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "You did what you said you would. That's more than most." Behind them, a few more figures were gathering, locals, veterans. A young woman with short hair and a soft smile who Catherine somehow knew was Carla's niece. She looked so much like her aunt it knocked the breath from her lungs. The same nose, the same eyes. The young woman stepped forward. "You must be Cat." Catherine nodded. "I grew up on stories about you," she said. "I used to think my aunt made you up. This badass medic who saved lives, never smiled in photos and drove halfway across the country to finish a vow. You were like a myth." "Just stubborn," Catherine said. The girl laughed, and it sounded exactly like Carla's laugh. For a second, the square blurred behind tears Catherine didn't try to hide. "We're holding a community dinner tonight," the niece said. "You'll come?" Catherine looked around, at the faces watching her, at the name carved into stone, at the sky above, so open and blue it looked like forever. "I'll stay," she said. That night they fed her more than she could eat. Barbecue, biscuits, peach cobbler that made her eyes close on the first bite. They told stories. Carla's niece sharing tales of her childhood visits, veterans swapping lies that had just enough truth to sting. Someone brought out a guitar. Someone else sang. And Catherine laughed. Not a small laugh, a full one. Her chest opened for it, wide and unguarded. It echoed off the walls of the community hall and felt like freedom. Later, as the crowd thinned and the stars came out over Colton, she stood alone for a while under the old oak tree near the memorial. The air was warm. The tags around her neck felt lighter. She looked up at the sky, and she spoke aloud, no longer afraid of the silence. "You were right, Carla. It was worth seeing, all of it." And for the first time in decades, Catherine Boyle felt whole. Not finished. Your stuff. For the road didn't end here. But the promise did. And that was enough.